Warlord Kuranash had conquered 6 star systems, commanded 3,000 soldiers, and reduced entire planetary defense forces to scrap metal. But she'd never been asked to validate parking before. The human behind the counter looked up from his register with the kind of smile that suggested he'd never seen a Vacrian battle cruiser vaporize a moon. His name tag read Danny in cheerful blue letters. The cafe itself was smaller than her personal quarters aboard the Crimson Talon, packed with mismatched furniture and the smell of roasted beans that somehow made her secondary lungs flutter in a way that felt dangerously close to contentment. "First time at the roasted bean?" Danny asked, wiping down an espresso machine that had probably seen more maintenance in the last week than most human colony ships received in a year. Kuranash's claws twitched against the data pad, concealing her protection contract. 3 pages of legal language that essentially boiled down to pay me or your establishment becomes a crater. This type of document had been used across a dozen worlds. It had never failed to produce immediate compliance, usually accompanied by the satisfying scent of sweat. "Yes," she managed, her translator chip rendering the word with perhaps too much gravitas for a conversation about beverages. Danny's grin widened. He pushed a small cardboard square across the counter. "Awesome. Welcome to our loyalty program. Buy 10 drinks, get 1 free. I'll punch this one right now. What can I get started for you?" Kuranash stared at the card. It had tiny illustrations of coffee cups on it. One had already been marked with a hole punch that made a satisfying click sound she found oddly pleasing. She glanced at the protection contract, then at Danny's expectant face, then at the card with its cheerful little cups. "Just black coffee," she said. "You got it." Danny turned to his machines with the efficiency of someone who'd performed this ritual 10,000 times. She should correct him. She absolutely should explain that the data pad in her hands contained not a loyalty program sign-up, but a binding agreement that he would pay her 5,000 credits monthly. She should make it clear that she was Kuranash the Unbreakable, whose name made colonial governors lock their doors at night. Instead, she watched him pour coffee into a biodegradable cup. "Anything else? The blueberry muffins just came out of the oven." The scent hit her chemoreceptors like a tactical strike. Kuranash's species had evolved to detect chemical compounds across impressive distances, useful for tracking prey, less useful for maintaining dignity in bakeries. "1 muffin," she heard herself say. Danny boxed it with practiced ease and slid it across the counter alongside her coffee. "That'll be 8 credits, and here," he pushed a small container toward her. "Try this honey butter. Absolutely changes the game." Kuranash paid with a credit chip worth more than his monthly rent, accepted her items, and retreated to a corner table where she could monitor both entrances and pretend she hadn't just completely failed her first protection racket in a decade. The muffin was extraordinary, that was the problem. "Boss, we've been holding position in orbit for 6 hours, Raxel said through the comm, his confusion bleeding through even the military-grade encryption. "The crew is asking if there's been a complication with the extraction." Kuranash swallowed another bite of muffin and glanced around the roasted bean. Danny was helping an elderly human woman choose between tea varieties with the same earnest attention he'd shown her. 3 other patrons occupied tables, none of them armed, none of them looking remotely concerned about the Vacrian warlord in their midst. "Negative," she replied, keeping her voice low. "I'm conducting territorial reconnaissance. This establishment is strategically positioned near the main commerce hub. You want me to send a surveillance drone?" "Absolutely not." "Maintain position. I'll return when my analysis is complete." She disconnected before Raxel could ask follow-up questions and took another bite. The honey butter really did change the game. Kuranash returned the next day, and the day after that. By the 4th visit, Danny now greeted her by a shortened version of her name, Kira, rather than trying to crank out Kuranash Saravok, the unbreakable first blade of the Crimson Fleet. "The usual," he said with a smile. She nodded, settling into what had somehow become her table. Danny already had her punch card ready, and the click of the hole punch had started to feel like a small victory rather than evidence of her complete failure as an extortionist. "Busy day?" Danny asked while preparing her coffee. "Moderately." She'd spent the morning reviewing invasion plans for a corporate mining colony, but that seemed inappropriate to mention. "Yourself?" "Yeah, actually, health inspector came by." Danny rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "Apparently my permits weren't properly filed when I first opened. I thought I'd done everything right, but bureaucracy, you know." Kuranash's combat implants registered a sudden spike in her pulse rate. Did they threaten to close you down? Nah, just need to submit some additional paperwork. Annoying, but I'll handle it. He placed her coffee on the counter. Muffin today? Yes. And she hesitated. I could review your documentation, ensure compliance. Danny's smile could have powered a small station. Really? That'd be amazing. I'm decent with coffee, terrible with forms. She stayed an extra hour helping him sort through permits, licenses, and zoning regulations. Her tactical training in legal frameworks, useful for identifying loopholes in planetary defense treaties, translated surprisingly well to small business administration. When she left, Danny had a clear path to compliance, and she had a strange, warm sensation in her central chest cavity that had nothing to do with the coffee. Raxel cornered her the moment she boarded the Crimson Talon that evening. Boss, with respect, the crew needs clarity. We've been conducting territorial reconnaissance for 5 days. Several of the gunners are asking if we're planning an extended occupation of this colony. Kuranash pulled up a star chart on the bridge display, pretending to study it with tactical interest. This colony represents a strategic position in the Outer Rim. Control of the commerce routes through this sector would provide significant leverage. Against who? The colonial government here couldn't repel a merchant dispute. Raxel moved closer, lowering his voice. What's really going on? She turned to face him. Raxel had served under her command for 6 years, had watched her break a siege at the Battle of Crystalline Deep, had helped her negotiate surrender terms with 3 different planetary governments. He'd earned honesty. I'm scouting weaknesses, she said. The human who operates the roasted bean, there's something unusual about him. His complete lack of fear, his efficiency, his tactical approach to customer service. I'm attempting to understand what makes him effective. Raxel's expression suggested he didn't believe a word of it, but he was too professional to push further. Understood. Should we continue maintaining orbital position? Affirmative. I'll require another week minimum for thorough analysis. After he left, Kuranash returned to her quarters and pulled up surveillance footage of the roasted bean's exterior. Not because she needed intelligence, because watching Danny greet his morning customers with unfailing cheerfulness made something in her chest cavity feel less like a weapon and more like a liability. The rival gang made their move on a Tuesday. Kuranash knew Torvin's crew by reputation, small-time pirates with delusions of grandeur who preyed on unprotected merchants in fringe colonies. She'd ignored them the same way she ignored most minor criminal operations that didn't interfere with her territory. The galaxy was large enough for hierarchies to exist without constant conflict. Apparently, Torvin disagreed with that philosophy. She was 3 sips into her morning coffee when she noticed them through the cafe window. 4 Graxian thugs in mismatched armor, moving with the swagger of people who'd watched too many intimidation videos and not enough actual combat footage. They were heading directly for the roasted bean. Kira, you okay? You just crushed your cup. Danny's concerned voice cut through her tactical assessment. She looked down at the biodegradable container now leaking coffee across her claws. Fine, muscular spasm, she stood abruptly. I need to step outside briefly. Want me to make you another? But she was already moving toward the door, intercepting the Graxians before they could enter. The leader, distinguished by slightly better armor and considerably worse judgment, pulled up short when he found himself face-to-face with 7 feet of Vakrian battle commander. This establishment is under my protection, Kuranash said quietly. Leave. The leader's translator took a moment to process her words, probably choking on the subharmonics that her species used to indicate mortal threat. His hand drifted toward his plasma pistol. Don't know who you think you are, lady, but Torvin sent us to collect. This whole district pays him now. Kuranash tilted her head slightly, activating the combat implants along her spine. They hummed with barely contained energy, casting faint blue light across her scales. I am Kuranash the Unbreakable, first blade of the Crimson Fleet, conqueror of the 6 systems, and the entity responsible for the Graxian 7th Fleet's complete annihilation at the Battle of Crystalline Deep. I believe your species considers that particular engagement a cautionary tale told to new recruits. The leader's skin tone shifted through 3 different shades of pale. The Crimson Talon. That's your ship in orbit? Yes. And if you attempt to enter this Kristen's, if you speak to its proprietor, if you so much as cast a shadow across his doorway, I will reduce Torvin's entire operation to constituent atoms before your corpse finishes cooling. They retreated with impressive speed for beings encumbered by poorly maintained armor. Kuranash watched until they disappeared around a corner, then checked her reflection in the cafe window. Her combat implants were still glowing. She forced them to power down, smoothed her scales, and re-entered the roasted bean. Danny looked up from her stocking napkins. Everything good? Yes. Simply some individuals who had incorrect information about local regulations. She resumed her seat at her usual table. I clarified the situation. Huh, okay. He grabbed a fresh cup. Let me make you another coffee. On the house, since yours ended up on the floor. She watched him work, his movements economical and practiced, completely unaware that he'd just been the focal point of a confrontation that could have sparked an interstellar incident. The trust implicit in that ignorance felt heavier than any weapon she'd ever carried. Raxel called 30 minutes later, voice tight with controlled alarm. Boss, we just detected a coded transmission from the planet's surface to a light freighter registered to Torvin's syndicate. They're requesting immediate backup. Do we engage? Negative. Monitor their communications but take no action. If they depart the system, let them go. Boss, they're not a threat, Raxel. They received information that changed their tactical assessment. They'll report back to Torvin, and he'll withdraw his operations from this colony entirely. She took a sip of coffee, perfect temperature, exactly the right bitterness. Problem solved. What information did they receive? That this territory is already claimed. There was a long pause on the other end of the comm. Boss, did you just start a protection racket over a coffee shop? I did not start anything. I prevented an escalation that would have disrupted local commerce and potentially caused harm to civilian infrastructure. The defensiveness in her own voice was unbecoming of a warlord. She forced her tone back to neutral authority. Continue monitoring. Report any unusual activity. She disconnected and found Danny standing beside her table with a fresh blueberry muffin she hadn't ordered. You looked stressed, he said. Muffins help with stress. Scientific fact. Kuranash accepted it without argument. Thank you. No problem. He started to turn away, then paused. Hey, random question, did you ever finish that documentation review? I got an email saying all my permits are suddenly in perfect order, like better than perfect. Someone even fixed a zoning issue I didn't know I had. She focused intently on her muffin. I may have submitted some additional corrections to ensure comprehensive compliance. That's amazing. You saved me probably weeks of headaches. His smile was warm enough to melt hull plating. Next coffee's free. You don't owe me anything. I know I don't have to, but I want to. That's kind of how this works. He gestured around the cafe. People help each other out. Builds community. After he left, Kuranash sat in silence, turning his words over in her mind. In her experience, transactions were simple. Force applied, compliance achieved, payment extracted. The concept of wanting to reciprocate kindness without formal obligation or threat of violence was foreign to her tactical training. It was also, she was beginning to realize, the most dangerous thing she'd ever encountered. The confrontation with Torvin himself happened 3 days later, though not in any way Kuranash had anticipated. She was helping Danny rearrange furniture to accommodate a new shipment of tables when the syndicate boss walked through the door flanked by 2 bodyguards. Torvin was Graxian like his thugs, but older, scarred, and carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd survived long enough in the underworld to develop actual competence. He stopped when he saw Kuranash holding a chair. For several seconds, the only sound was the ambient music Danny insisted helped create atmosphere. I need to speak with the proprietor, Torvin said finally. Alone, Danny looked up from the tablet where he'd been checking inventory. That's me. What can I help you with? Kuranash set down the chair with deliberate care and positioned herself between Danny and the syndicate boss. Her combat implants powered up automatically, casting the cafe in faint blue light. I'll handle this, she told Danny without breaking eye contact with Torvin. Handle what? Danny's confusion was genuine. Kira, do you know this guy? Torvin laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. She didn't tell you, this whole block is contested territory. Your cafe sits right on the border between her operation and mine. He pulled out a datapad. I came to negotiate terms. Split the protection fees, establish clear boundaries, avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Protection fees? Danny looked between them. Someone's been collecting protection fees? The silence stretched long enough to become actively painful. Kuranash felt her carefully maintained cover story crumbling like a hull breach. I can explain, she started, Please do, Danny said quietly. The warmth had drained from his voice, replaced by something that might have been disappointment. Somehow that was infinitely worse than fear. Kuranash pulled out her datapad, the one with the protection contract still saved in its memory. She placed it on the nearest table. I came here 6 days ago intending to extort you. This is a standard protection arrangement I've implemented across multiple colonies. You pay me monthly, I ensure no harm comes to your establishment. Danny picked up the datapad, scrolled through the contract. 5,000 credits monthly. Yes, but before I could show you the contract, you had already signed me up for your loyalty program. I should have corrected you, I meant to. But you were so pleased about the punch card, and then you gave me coffee, and the muffin was exceptional. And she stopped, recognizing that tactical honesty required brevity. I failed to execute my intended objective. So you've been coming here every day, helping me with permits, drinking coffee, and apparently scaring off rival gangs. Danny set down the datapad. Kira, that's not a protection racket, that's just protection. The distinction seems minimal. The distinction is consent and payment. He crossed his arms. You never actually asked me for money. Torvin cleared his throat. This is all very touching, but I have business interests in this sector. If she's not collecting, then the territory defaults to— No one is collecting from my cafe, Danny interrupted. His voice remained level, but there was steel underneath it. I don't pay protection fees, not to her, not to you, not to anyone. Kuranash felt something cold settle in her primary stomach. Of course. Danny operated on different principles: community, reciprocity, mutual benefit. The idea that she'd been pretending friendship while planning extortion would be unforgivable. She'd lost access to the roasted bean, to the muffins, to the peaceful corner table where she'd felt almost like a person instead of a weapon. More importantly, she'd lost Danny's trust. Understood, she said. I'll remove myself from your establishment. Wait, I didn't say you couldn't come back. I said I'm not paying protection fees. Danny turned to Torvin. And you need to leave. Torvin's laugh was genuinely amused this time. You're refusing both of us. Do you understand what that means? It means I run an independent business that serves good coffee and doesn't participate in criminal enterprises. Danny walked to the door, held it open. I'm not interested in protection services. The bodyguards moved forward, but Kuranash was faster. She crossed the cafe in 3 strides, putting herself between them and Danny. Her combat implants flared to full power, bathing everything in blue light. He said leave, she said softly. Torvin studied her for a long moment. You're protecting him for free now. That's not how this works. I'm protecting him because he deserves to exist without threat of violence. Whether that aligns with standard operational procedures is irrelevant. Her claws extended slightly. Choose your next action carefully. The syndicate boss calculated odds with the speed of someone who'd survived by knowing when to fight and when to withdraw. Whatever he saw in Kuranash's stance convinced him this was a withdrawal scenario. He gestured to his bodyguards. This isn't over, he said, moving toward the door. Yes, it is, Kuranash replied. If you or anyone in your organization approaches this establishment again, I will consider it a declaration of war against the Crimson Fleet. The last group who made that declaration no longer exists in any meaningful sense. Ask your Graxian historians about Crystalline Deep. They left. Danny closed the door behind them and locked it, then turned to face her. Okay, he said. I think we need to have a conversation. They sat at her usual table. Danny with tea, Kuranash with nothing because her hands needed something to do, and crushing cups had already proven problematic. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, making ordinary furniture look almost significant. I don't understand what just happened, Danny admitted. Any of it. You're actually a warlord? Yes. Commander of the Crimson Fleet, operative across 6 conquered systems. Responsible for multiple military engagements, resulting in enemy surrender or annihilation. She forced herself to maintain eye contact. I have destroyed planetary defense grids, negotiated territorial concessions through threat of force, and implemented protection contracts across dozens of colonies. But you never implemented one here. I intended to. The first day, I walked in prepared to present my standard terms. She gestured to the punch card on the table between them. 8 holes punched now, 2 away from a free coffee. You gave me this instead, and you didn't correct me because you smiled at me like I was a customer instead of a threat. Because the coffee was excellent and the muffin was extraordinary, and you asked about my day like the answer mattered. The words came faster now, her translator struggling to keep pace. Because for 6 days I got to be someone who drinks coffee instead of someone who breaks civilizations. Danny was quiet for a long moment. When you helped with my permits, that was real? Yes. And when I prevented Torvin's initial crew from entering, that was also real. I have been protecting your establishment without compensation because the thought of harm coming to you is tactically unacceptable to me. Tactically? Emotionally, she corrected quietly. The thought is emotionally unacceptable. More silence. Danny stirred his tea with deliberate focus. I need to understand something. When you come here, when you drink coffee and eat muffins and help me move furniture, is that part of some strategy? Are you still running an operation? No. I am. Kuranash struggled for words her translator could render accurately. I am experiencing something my species calls Kavresh. The closest human translation would be sanctuary, but it's more specific. A place where weapons become unnecessary. Where your value isn't measured in threat potential. And the roasted bean is that for you? You are that for me. The confession hung in the air between them. Danny set down his tea. Kira, I'm going to be very direct because I think we're past the point of polite ambiguity. Are you saying you have romantic feelings for me? Her combat implants flickered with the Vacrian equivalent of embarrassment. I am saying that over the past 6 days, I have discovered that I would rather buy 9 more coffees to fill a punch card than conquer another system. That I check your health and safety protocols with more attention than I review tactical reports. That the idea of you being harmed activates threat responses in me that entire enemy fleets have failed to trigger. That's a yes, then. Danny leaned back in his chair, processing. Okay. Here's where I'm at. I'm definitely attracted to you. You're competent and confident, and when you smile, which is rare, it's like watching a solar eclipse. Objectively stunning, but you don't look directly at it too long. He paused. But you're also a warlord who conquers star systems. That's a significant career complication. I understand. My profession makes normal interpersonal connections impossible. I didn't say impossible, I said complicated. He drummed his fingers on the table. Can I ask you something? Why do you do it? The conquering and the protection rackets and all of it. Kuranash considered the question. Because I am exceptionally skilled at violence and strategic subjugation. It's efficient utilization of my capabilities. That's not an answer, that's a job description. Danny leaned forward. Why do you keep doing it? The real answer sat heavy in her chest cavity, a truth she'd never articulated even to herself. Because I don't know what else I would be. Without conquest, without territory, without enemies to defeat, what purpose would I serve? Maybe you could try serving coffee. She stared at him. That's not a serious suggestion. Why not? You're organized, you're good with regulations, you're clearly capable of customer service when you're not trying to extort people. His smile was tentative but genuine. And you make a mean honey butter recommendation. I command 3,000 soldiers, and I bet you were terrifying at it, but were you happy? The question should have been irrelevant. Happiness wasn't a tactical consideration. It didn't contribute to strategic objectives or territorial acquisition. It was a luxury for civilians who didn't bear the responsibility of maintaining order through superior firepower. Except she'd been happier in the past 6 days than in the previous 6 years. No, she admitted, I was effective, not happy. Danny stood, walked behind the counter, and started preparing 2 cups of coffee. Here's what I'm thinking. I've been wanting to expand the roasted bean, but don't have the capital or the business expertise. You clearly have both. Plus the kind of organizational skills that probably make planetary invasions run on time. You're suggesting a business partnership? I'm suggesting you try something different. See if you like building things more than breaking them. He placed a coffee in front of her, perfect temperature, exactly right. And maybe we see if there's potential for a different kind of partnership too. But that second part only happens if you want it, and if we can figure out how to make it work. Kuranash picked up the coffee, letting the warmth seep into her claws. I would need to dissolve the Crimson Fleet, redistribute territories, release my crew from service. Probably, yeah. That seems like a minimum requirement for the whole, not being a warlord anymore thing. It would take weeks, possibly months to ensure proper transitions and prevent power vacuums. I'm not going anywhere, she looked up at him. This human who ran a cafe with the same earnest efficiency others applied to military campaigns, who'd faced down a syndicate boss and a warlord in the same conversation, and emerged offering coffee. I have never done anything like this before, she said. I have no experience with building instead of conquering, with partnership instead of subjugation. I will make errors. Yeah, probably. I've never dated a warlord before either, so I'll definitely make errors too. Danny sat across from her again. But here's the thing about fresh starts. They come with learning curves. We figure it out as we go. Kuranash pulled out her datapad, deleted the protection contract from memory, and opened a new document. I should contact Raxel, begin the dissolution process, establish transition protocols. Or, Danny pushed the punch card across the table, you could drink your coffee, eat a muffin, and handle the galactic restructuring tomorrow. Sometimes the small moments matter more than the strategic ones. She picked up the punch card, studied the 8 small holes that represented 6 days of accidentally discovering a different kind of strength. 2 more coffees until I earn a free one. Technically one, since this one's on the house. Consider it a signing bonus for the partnership. I haven't agreed to anything formal yet. No, but you also haven't left to go dissolve your criminal empire, which I'm taking as a positive sign. His smile was warm and genuine and directed entirely at her. Stay a while. We can discuss terms over muffins. Kuranash, the unbreakable first blade of the Crimson Fleet, conqueror of 6 systems, settled back into her chair and reached for a blueberry muffin. Through the cafe window, she could see her ship hanging in orbit, a weapon waiting to be given purpose. Tomorrow, she would begin the complicated process of choosing a different path. Tomorrow, she would figure out how to transition from warlord to something gentler. Today, she would drink coffee with someone who looked at her and saw potential instead of threat. Terms are acceptable, she said, though I believe proper negotiation requires we sample the lemon poppy seed muffins as well, for comparative analysis. Danny's laugh was bright and unguarded. I think this partnership is going to work out just fine. 6 months later, the roasted bean expanded into the adjacent storefront, offering an extended menu and regular live music nights. The grand opening featured a ribbon-cutting ceremony performed by Danny and his business partner, a former warlord who discovered that managing supply chains and customer relations required the same strategic skills as territorial conquest, but came with significantly better muffins. Raxel took a management position in the expanded cafe after his own honorable discharge from the dissolved Crimson Fleet. He maintained that watching his former commander fret over napkin suppliers was more surreal than anything he'd experienced in combat. But the health benefits were excellent, and the coffee was legitimately exceptional. Torvin's syndicate withdrew from the colony entirely after a brief but decisive confrontation with local authorities, who received anonymous intelligence about the organization's illegal activities. The intelligence was thorough, detailed, and delivered with the kind of tactical precision that suggested intimate familiarity with criminal operations. No one asked questions about the source. Some gifts were better accepted than examined. On quiet mornings before the cafe opened, Kuranash sometimes stood at the window and watched the sunrise paint the colony in shades of gold and amber. Her ship was gone, sold to a legitimate security contractor who appreciated its structural integrity. Her combat implants were still functional but rarely activated. Her claws still extended when threatened, but those moments grew increasingly rare. What remained was simpler and infinitely more complex. A cafe full of regular customers who knew her name, a business partner who made her laugh, a punch card that had long since been retired in favor of unlimited free coffee, and the strange, revolutionary concept that strength could be measured in something other than the territory you controlled or the enemies you defeated. Hey, Danny said, emerging from the back room with a tray of fresh muffins. You ready for the morning rush? Kuranash turned from the window, checked the register, confirmed the coffee machines were properly calibrated, and allowed herself a small smile. Affirmative. All systems operational. You know you don't have to use military terminology for making coffee, right? Old habits, I'm working on it. He bumped her shoulder gently as he passed. I know. And you're doing great. The morning rush arrived right on time, humans and aliens and everything in between, seeking caffeine and conversation, and the particular kind of sanctuary that only existed in spaces built on mutual respect rather than mutual threat. Kuranash served them with efficiency born from tactical training and warmth, learned from someone who'd taught her that strength and gentleness weren't opposing forces, but complementary ones. Somewhere across the galaxy, empires rose and fell, territory changed hands. New warlords emerged to fill the vacuums left by old ones. The universe continued its eternal cycle of conflict and conquest. And in one small cafe on a minor colony world, a former warlord made perfect coffee, recommended the blueberry muffins with complete sincerity, and discovered that the most revolutionary act she'd ever committed wasn't the conquest of 6 systems. It was choosing to put down her weapons and pick up a punch card instead.